let's go ahead and solve the one real rational solution. And you might be asking, how did you know there's one real rational solution besides actually already solving the problem before? Well, let's go ahead and work on the first tip that I can show you on how to identify one real rational solution. So we have a quadratic equation. It's set equals 0. It's in our standard form. We can easily identify our a, b, and c, right? The coefficients of our quadratic, coefficients of our linear, and then our constant. Let's go ahead and write those down, and then I'll get into how you can easily identify what is the type of solutions of your quadratic. Okay, so from here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to find out what the discriminant is. Now, you might be asking, what is the discriminant? Where did it come from? Don't worry about that right now. Let's just go ahead and plug it into this formula, and I'll get into, you'll see exactly where this discriminant comes from. So the discriminant is b squared minus 4 times a times c, and that is going to tell us everything we want to know about the solutions, except for the answers, of this quadratic. And especially that, is it one real? Is it two real? Is it two real irrational? Or are they rational? Or is there no solution? Are they complex? Like, everything about it comes from the discriminant. So what we're simply going to do is plug things in. Now, when you plug things in, please make sure you're using parentheses. All right. And the reason why I like using parentheses is because, again, that triggers in my brain that not only did I replace my variables with these values, but also in the case when we have negatives or subtraction symbols, that kind of keeps things isolated. This is a negative 12 times negative 12, which is going to be 144. Now, I realize we might be getting into some larger numbers. So take things slow, right? If you're not what's 4 times 4 times 9, just do one thing at a time. 4 times 4 is going to be 16, right? Most students recognize that. And now we can forget about this negative here, and we can just do the multiplication over here. Now, 16 times 9 might be a little difficult for some students as well, but we know 9 times 10 is 90, and 9 times 6 is 54. We know those two multiplications, or at least we should. So 90 plus 54 is going to be a 144. And lo and behold, ladies and gentlemen, what do we get? We get 0. Now, the reason why this tells us is we're going to have 1, 2 solution comes from actually the quadratic formula. So let's go ahead and write that down, and you'll see exactly how this produces our one solution. Okay, so here's the quadratic formula. Make sure that you know this and remember it. It's used not just in Algebra 1, but all the way up through calculus and beyond. It's very, very important, and it's very, very helpful as well as useful. And I want you to recognize something. Our discriminant, this b squared minus 4 times a times c, is right under the radical, right? That's what we're taking the square root of. And there's a couple important things to recognize when we're taking the square root of something. When we're taking the square root of something, we have to take the square root of positive numbers, right? And when we introduce the square root, we have to do the plus or minus. That's where that plus or minus comes from. When we derive the quadratic formula, we have that positive as well as that negative value. And just real quick, I'll kind of explain. Like if I had an x squared is equal to 4, right? To solve for x, we square root both sides, and x equals a plus or minus 2. So when we derive the quadratic formula, that's why we have that plus or minus here. But there is one number that is neither positive nor negative. So therefore, we're not going to have the plus or minus. And that one number is going to be 0. So what happens when my discriminant is equal to 0? Well, let's go and plug in the rest of these numbers here, rest of these values, and let's go and see why that does not produce any two solutions or no solution. Okay, so in this case here, we just plugged in, for and for a and opposite of b, not negative b, just opposite of b. So it was already negative, so now it's positive. And we have 12 plus or minus the square root of 0. Well, what is the square root of 0, right? The square root of 4 is, 2, right? The square root of 0 is just 0. And if you add or subtract 0, that's not changing anything. If I take 12, add 0 or subtract 0, I'm still going to have a 12. So now I'm just going to be left with one solution, x equals 12 over 8. And I'm not going to leave my solution like that. I'm going to simplify, and I'm going to divide the top and bottom by a 4, and that's going to leave me with a 3/2. So if you want more examples on solving with the quadratic formula, or just help with solving quadratics in general, then go and check out the next video I have for you here.